Bloodhound Lil Jeff's mom just inherited $1 million, and the way she is living is insane. On paper, $1 million sounds like a blessing. It sounds like a situation most people would want to be in. But when you start looking at the full picture of what this woman has been going through, what her life actually looks like behind that number, and everything that came attached to that inheritance, the blessing starts looking like something else entirely. There is a story here that goes way deeper than money, and by the time it is all laid out, that insanity is going to make complete sense. Stay locked in, but real quick, if you're serious about winning in the rap game, I put everything I know into one ebook. I'm talking how to actually grow an audience from zero, how to get labels reaching out to you with deals, and even how to get paid in this industry without ever touching a mic. And nah, it's not too late. People love to say the wave passed. It didn't. New artists and new hustlers are blowing up every single day, and the ones eating are the ones who started now instead of waiting. It's only $39. That's a few cups of coffee for a blueprint that can change how you move in this game forever. Links in the description bio. Go grab it. Then let's get back to the video. Yo, what is good, fam? Welcome back. Today we are breaking down the full story behind Bloodhound Lil Jeff's mother, who she is, what her son's life and death actually looked like, how that $1 million inheritance came about, and why despite all of it, the way she is living right now is genuinely insane. Let us get into it. Jeffrey Lamar Harris Jr. was born on July 14, 2002, on Chicago's South Side. He grew up in an environment that shaped him in ways that were visible in every single thing he put out. He went by Bloodhound Lil Jeff, and by the time most people outside of Chicago were discovering his music, he had already been living the realities his lyrics described for years. He started dropping music around 2022, coming out with early tracks that established his voice within the underground drill scene. He collaborated with Bloodhound Q50 on records that gained traction within the community, and his sound carried a rawness that made people pay attention. He was not polished. He was not calculating a mainstream crossover. He was simply putting his actual life into bars, and that authenticity created an audience that believed every word he said, because everything he said felt real. Jeff's reputation within Chicago drill specifically came from the fact that he was not performing street credibility. He was not borrowing the aesthetic of the culture while living something different behind closed doors. The music he made, the social media presence he maintained, the lifestyle he documented, all of it was consistent. And in the world of Chicago drill, where authenticity is measured against the most unforgiving standards imaginable, that consistency built him something that most artists spend years chasing. It built him genuine respect from the people who mattered most within that specific lane of music. But here's where it gets real. To truly understand Lil Jeff, you have to understand the environment that produced him. Chicago's South Side has been the backdrop for some of the most powerful music of the last 15 years. It has also been the backdrop for some of the most devastating violence in any American city. These two things are not separate. They are the same story told from different angles. Young men growing up in neighborhoods marked by concentrated poverty, generational disinvestment, and ongoing cycles of gang conflict have used drill music as both a mirror and a release valve. The music reflects what is actually happening in those streets. It does not sanitize it. It does not editorialize it. It captures it with the kind of unflinching directness that makes some people uncomfortable and makes others feel genuinely seen for the first time. Jeff grew up in that world from the beginning. His home was reportedly shot up when he was 14 years old. The violence was not abstract for him. It was not something he discovered when he got into music. It was something he was born into, something that shaped every decision he made before he ever picked up a microphone. When his cousin, a member of the Bloodhound Collective, was killed by a rival, Jeff's trajectory shifted completely. The basketball dreams he had carried through his early teen years gave way to something else entirely. He moved off the porch, as they say in Chicago, and everything that followed flowed directly from that moment. The Bloodhound Collective itself was central to everything Jeff represented. The name referred to a specific crew rooted in Chicago's South Side, associated with an aggressive, relentless approach to street rivalries that Jeff channeled directly into his music. His moniker, the Bloody Reaper, told you exactly where his head was when he was making music. He was not putting on a costume. He was reporting from inside a reality that very few people on the outside would ever get close enough to understand. Now let us talk about his mother. because this is where the story gets deeply complicated and where so much of the public debate is centered since Jeff's death. His mother raised him largely on her own through the environment of Chicago's South Side, and by all accounts, she was not a distant figure in his life. She was present, she was involved, and what made her controversial in the public eye was not just that her son lived a violent street life, but the way she reportedly responded to it. Clips and commentary that circulated widely painted a picture of a mother who was not only aware of what her son was doing, but appeared to embrace it. There are accounts of Jeff describing having a shootout in front of his mother. Videos surfaced that showed her energy around his street reputation was not one of fear or disapproval. One widely circulated YouTube video is literally titled "Bloodhound Lil Jeff's Mother Was a Gangster," and an entire video series called "Meet the Harris Family: The Savages That Raised the Demon" gathered significant traction across platforms by documenting how deeply the street mentality ran through the family as a whole. The narrative that formed around her was that this was not a mother who lost her son to the streets despite her best efforts. This was a mother who, by many accounts and clips that circulated, appeared to be proud of who he was and what he was doing. That distinction hit different to a lot of people watching from the outside, and it is a major reason why her name has stayed attached to controversy long after Jeff was gone. Real talk, how much of that narrative is fully accurate and how much of it is people interpreting fragments out of full context is genuinely hard to know. What is undeniable is that she was close to him. She knew the world he was operating in, and the public perception of her role in shaping who he became is a conversation that is not quieted down. Jeff's music career really started gaining serious momentum in 2024. He had been building quietly for a couple of years, but February of that year changed everything. He dropped a record called Aha, and it spread through the drill community like nothing he had released before. The record contained lyrics that were about as direct and self-incriminating as anything being made in Chicago at the time. People were not just listening to it, they were sharing it, breaking it down, arguing about it. Many credited Jeff and a handful of artists around him with genuinely reviving a Chicago drill scene that had started to lose some of its momentum. His name was being mentioned in the same conversations as artists who had been doing it for years, and he was only a few months into his real breakout moment. His collaborations with Bloodhound Q50 were a major part of his appeal. The chemistry between them created records that felt like genuine artistic statements rather than just content. Tracks like 333, Don't Blink, or Stare, and Overkill established a sound that felt specific to their collective, while also speaking to a broader audience within the drill world. Jeff was not trying to sound like everyone else. He had his own cadence, his own way of building tension within a verse, and fans responded to that distinctiveness in a way that was impossible to manufacture. But here is where it gets complicated, fam. The controversies surrounding Jeff were not just talk. His lyrics frequently referenced real incidents, real rivalries, and real acts of violence. He allegedly claimed responsibility for multiple shootings in his music. His presence outside the music was equally unfiltered. In January of 2024, just months before his death, he posted about an incident involving an acquaintance and warned people about the volatility of his enemies. These were not manufactured narratives. These were someone documenting a genuine conflict that had no clear off-ramp in sight. And the people who followed his music understood exactly what they were watching, even as they kept watching. For supporters, that level of authenticity was the entire point. It was why his music hit differently than artists performing similar themes without the lived reality behind them. For critics, it was evidence of exactly the kind of cycle that keeps claiming young men in Chicago before they ever get a real chance to become something beyond what their environment initially shaped them to be. Both of those perspectives carry weight, because neither one fully captures what was actually happening in real time. Then June 8th, 2024 arrived, and everything changed. The events of that day unfolded in the Woodlawn neighborhood on Chicago's South Side. Jeff was reportedly part of a group that entered rival territory, and the confrontation that followed ended in a fatal shootout. Surveillance footage captured a portion of what happened. The images that circulated in the hours and days after were some of the most disturbing to come out of Chicago in years. Jeff was shot somewhere between 15 and 19 times. He was 21 years old. His first album, Stepping in Blood, would be released posthumously. He never got to hear how the world received the full version of his catalog. He never got to see what his career could have become if that day had ended differently. And for the people closest to him, that reality sits on top of everything else that followed. Now, this is where the story shifts into something bigger, because when Jeff died, his name did not fade, it exploded. Within days of his death, his music started moving in a way it had never moved while he was alive. Streams surged across every platform. His catalog reached audiences far outside Chicago that had never heard his name before the shooting. People who did not know who Bloodhound Lil Jeff was on June 7th were deep in his discography by June 10th. And that wave of posthumous attention set off a change of events that changed everything for the people around his name. On June 26, 2024, just 18 days after his death, his management dropped his posthumous album, Stepping in Blood. The timing was deliberate. The audience was already there and growing fast. The album landed with serious weight, featuring a remix to his breakout record, Aha, that included Chicago heavyweight G, Herbo. A second posthumous project, Bloody Brothers, followed not long after, keeping his catalog active and in front of a fan base that had no intention of moving on. These were not small underground releases. These were projects that reached genuine audiences and generated real streaming revenue at a level Jeff never saw during his lifetime. But here's where it gets real. Around the same time, reports and commentary from people close to the Bloodhound Collective confirmed that Jeff had been signed to Lil Bibby's Grade A Productions label before his death. Bloodhound Q50 spoke on it publicly. Grade A is a legitimate label operation with real distribution infrastructure behind it. The same label connected to artists like G Herbo. That deal meant Jeff's catalog had professional backing, real distribution reach, and a structure in place to monetize his music at scale after he was gone. The combination of that deal, the posthumous releases, the streaming surge, and the continued fan engagement is what fueled the conversation about $1 million inheritance flowing to his mother. Whether the number is exact or not, the money being generated by his legacy is very real. Now, this is where we got to address the money conversation, because the financial side of this story is both real and massively distorted depending on where you are getting your information. When a young artist's streaming numbers surge after their death, the revenue generated starts flowing toward their estate. That estate is typically managed by a family member, and in cases where no formal business structure was established before death, the mother is often the person who inherits both the legacy and the financial responsibility that comes with it. In Jeff's case, his mother became the primary point of contact for decisions surrounding his catalog and his name. What happened next was predictable if you have been paying attention to how internet content works. YouTube creators and TikTok commentators began estimating the financial value of Jeff's growing posthumous success. They looked at his streaming numbers. They speculated about distribution partnerships. They compared his trajectory to posthumous success stories like Pop Smoke, Juice WRLD, and XXXTentacion. They started attaching dollar figures to those estimates, and those figures grew with each retelling. What began as rough guesses about future royalty potential became transformed into clean, declarative claims. $1 million, inherited by his mother, reported as fact across platforms that do not require verification before posting. The real kicker, though, is that the truth is far more complicated. Reports and industry commentary suggest that Jeff's growing catalog did attract increased attention from distribution networks following his death. His unreleased material remained valuable. The continued streaming engagement generated real revenue. The potential for licensing, merchandise, and sustained fan engagement represented genuine long-term income for whoever managed his estate properly. All of that is true, but the specific claim of a $1 million lump sum inheritance moving directly to his mother in a single transaction appears to be far more a product of internet speculation than documented financial reality. The numbers spread because it was a compelling headline. The complexity of how posthumous music revenue actually accumulates and gets distributed over time does not fit neatly into a thumbnail. That said, the question of how his mother has been navigating the financial landscape surrounding Jeff's legacy is a real and important one. Managing the estate of a young artist whose posthumous popularity is growing is not a simple or comfortable task. It involves making decisions about music releases, licensing approvals, merchandise partnerships, and public representation, all while processing a level of personal grief that most people will never have to experience. There is no manual for this. There is no training program. A child is lost and then the industry comes calling. And those decisions have to get made while still waking up every day and facing the reality that he is not coming back. The business does not pause for the grief. The catalog does not wait. And the expectations from the people around the legacy do not slow down simply because the person at the center of it all is still trying to figure out how to breathe. And that brings us to the part of this story that actually matters most, fam. The part that the money conversation consistently overshadows. She lost her son. She lost a 21-year-old man she raised from birth. She lost someone she knew before any of the music, before any of the fans, before any of the posthumous deals and streaming numbers. She lost a version of Jeff that nobody outside of their household ever got to see. The grief that comes from that kind of loss does not respond to royalty checks. It does not get lighter because a song crosses a milestone. Every stream, every headline, every new wave of attention directed at his name is a reminder that the world keeps interacting with someone she can no longer reach. And navigating that grief while also being responsible for the financial and creative decisions surrounding his legacy is a weight that most people will never come close to understanding from the outside looking in. The characterization of her life as sad is not about her financial situation, and it should not be reduced to that framing. The sadness is in the totality of what she is carrying. It is in the scrutiny that followed her son's death and never fully went away. It is in the ongoing debates about her parenting, her choices, her awareness of the lifestyle that ultimately took Jeff from her. These are conversations being had by people who do not know her, do not know the full context of her family's life, and do not bear any of the actual weight of what she carries every single day. The commentary keeps coming, the questions keep coming, and she has to live inside all of it, with no off switch and no end date in sight. The internet has a particular way of approaching the mothers of young men who died violently in the drill community. They either become tragic symbols of grief or targets of criticism for how their child was raised. Very rarely do these conversations make room for actual complexity. But in her case, the conversation was not just general criticism. It was specific, it was pointed, and it was fueled by enough clips and commentary that it took on a life of its own. Let us talk about Bloodhound Q50, because his role in Jeff's continued legacy is significant. Q50 was Jeff's closest collaborator and cousin, and their partnership produced some of the most talked about records in the Bloodhound catalog. After Jeff's death, Q50 remained visible in keeping his name alive, continuing to push unreleased material and speak on who Jeff really was. The partnership they built did not dissolve when Jeff died. It kept carrying his name forward into spaces he never got to reach himself. This pattern plays out repeatedly in drill music. A catalog does not stop generating value when an artist dies. The combination of personal loyalty and commercial reality means that decisions about how a legacy gets managed and who benefits from it become conversations families have to navigate without any preparation. So check it. Lil Jeff's story is part of a larger pattern Chicago drill has been producing for over a decade. Young artists who build genuine audiences within the genre are also living in constant proximity to violence. The list of artists who reach their widest audiences posthumously is tragically long. FBG Duck, King Von, Capo. Each loss produced the same arc: a surge in attention, a spike in streaming numbers, a family left managing a legacy while processing unimaginable grief, a media cycle that eventually moved on while the grief did not. This pattern raises questions the genre has been wrestling with for years without clean answers. What is the responsibility of the music industry when it profits from the posthumous popularity of young men who died in circumstances directly connected to the world their music described? What does authentic representation of street life actually cost? And who pays that cost? The artists who lived and died within those realities paid it. Their families continue paying it every single day. The industry and the audience largely move on to the next story. The broader economics of posthumous success in drill music have shifted significantly as the genre has matured. In the early days, an artist's death might generate a brief spike before the catalog faded from view. Now, with streaming infrastructure, dedicated fan bases who actively push content, and a music economy built around catalog value, an artist's posthumous footprint can grow substantially over years. Licensing opportunities, brand partnerships, and the sustained value of masters and publishing rights all contribute to a financial picture that can evolve dramatically over time. For Jeff's mother, this means the financial conversation around his legacy is not a one-time event. It is an ongoing reality she will have to manage for years, potentially decades, depending on how his catalog continues to perform and how the people around his estate handle the business decisions that come with that responsibility. The $1 million figure that spread represents a snapshot of speculation, not a final accounting of what his legacy might ultimately generate over time. His influence on Chicago drill culture has continued to grow since his death. Newer artists reference him. Fans continue analyzing his lyrics with the kind of attention usually reserved for artists who have been gone far longer. His name comes up in conversations about the most authentic voices the genre produced during his era. For someone who only released music seriously for about 2 years, the footprint he left is remarkable. It speaks to the quality of connection he built with his audience, the sense that they were seeing something real and unfiltered that had not been packaged for broader consumption. He was not performing for a future audience. He was just being exactly who he was. And sometimes, that kind of authenticity leaves a mark that outlasts everything, including the person behind it. And yet, all of that cultural permanence comes packaged with something deeply uncomfortable. The story keeping his name alive is ultimately a story about a young man who died violently at 21 years old in a conflict that had no good ending available to either side. The cultural legacy and the circumstances of the death are inseparable. You cannot hold up one without acknowledging the other. And for his mother, that means every moment of recognition his name receives is also a moment of confronting exactly how and why he is gone. When you pull back from the money conversation and the debates about parenting and street loyalty, what you are left with is this: a mother who lost her child, a community that keeps producing these stories with no sign of the underlying conditions changing, a music industry that profits from the documentation of those conditions while investing almost nothing in reversing them, and the culture that converts all of it into content and moves on to the next story while the families involved never get to move on at all. The real question is not how much money Lil Jeff's mother inherited. The real question is what it means that the story gets framed that way in the first place. The focus on $1 million figure is a reflection of how these losses get processed from the outside. Numbers feel more concrete than grief. Financial narratives give people something to measure when the actual loss is immeasurable. Headlines built around inheritance imply that something valuable was passed on, and that framing makes it easier to look at the story without sitting too long in the part that is actually devastating. A mother outlived her son. Everything else is noise around that one truth. At the end of the day, the story of Bloodhound Lil Jeff and everything that followed is a story about what happens when art, violence, grief, and money all land on the same family at the same time. His music was real. His legacy is real. The revenue being generated by his catalog is real. And his mother's grief is real in a way that no financial figure can touch, transform, or make any easier to carry with each passing day. Every stream his songs generate is a reminder that he is gone. Every headline connecting her name to money is another version of that same reminder. Every fan who discovers his music for the first time is encountering the life of a young man who no longer exists. The music keeps growing, the conversation keeps growing, and through all of it, a woman who raised him from birth continues waking up in a world where her son is a legacy rather than someone she can reach. That is a reality that no inheritance figure changes, and it is the reality sitting underneath every headline attached to her name. That is the story behind the headline. That is why years after June 8th, 2024, the conversation surrounding Lil Jeff's mother has never fully stopped, not because of what she inherited, but because her story reflects something deeply uncomfortable about what this culture does with tragedy and what it costs the people at the center of it long after everyone else has moved on. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What does Jeff's legacy mean to you, and how do you think the industry should handle situations like this? Tap into what is on screen right now and subscribe with notifications on so you never miss what we drop next.